Welcome to Highland League Weekly, where the Press and Journal puts the spotlight on the Breedon Highland League. I'm Ryan Cryle, joined as usual by Callum Law and Paul Third as we discuss the second weekend of the 2026-27 Breedon Highland League season. Another weekend of eye-catching results. We've got to say we should start with the results of the weekend. Maybe we'll have different opinions. What we're going with first, Callum, what was your result of the weekend?
My result of the weekend was Formartine United 1, Brora Rangers 4 at North Lodge Park. In terms of I just thought Brora's first half performance in particular was very, very impressive. Really, once they got the early opener through corner bunts, they kind of just suffocated Formartine after that, to be honest. I mean, the second one, again, through corner bunts, gets a wee bit of luck in terms of there's a slight deflection, but he sort of goes for the spectacular with an overhead kick and gets his reward. Third was a penalty, which kind of make differing views on whether it should have been awarded. Maybe there wasn't any great appeals. So it was a wee pull for Finlay Morris and Connell Ewan. Wasn't any great appeals, and the sort of thing you see happen a fair bit at corners and isn't always given. But referee Nathan Crawford gave it, and Stuart Anderson sort of said that afterwards. He was kind of surprised it was given, whereas Stephen Mackay felt it was a stick-on penalty. James Anderson scored, and then the fourth goal was probably the pick of them, a lovely Brora move. Sort of Brora at their best, the way they moved the ball. James Wallace finished it off, and in a game between the sides that were third and first last season that I thought beforehand would be sort of really closely contested. It was an emphatic victory for Brora, despite Hamish Ritchie getting one back for Formartine in the second half. And I know it's obviously very early on, but for Brora to sort of win in that fashion, it's a sort of a wee bit of a statement of intent at this stage, and that was why it was my result of the weekend. I think for Formartine as well, like Stuart Anderson was saying afterwards, defensively it was sort of very out of character with them. I mean, if you compare it with last season, in 17 home league games they didn't lose and they only conceded 9 goals, and then they've conceded 4 on Saturday, so just defensively what wasn't their day at all.
Bit of shell shock at half time to find themselves 4-0 down. What was it like on the ground?
That's probably shell shock's probably the word a wee bit, just the way the game had got away from them. But the way Brora had played, they were on top, and that was the score.
Paul, you going for a different game?
I am. Buckie Thistle 7, Banks of D 2. That's astonishing for me. I mean, I expected Buckie to have some sort of reaction after the disappointment of going out of the Evening Express Aberdeenshire Cup to Formartine. I think it was 3-0 in midweek. So I thought, well, they're going to be looking to do something against D on Saturday at Victoria Park, but I didn't see 7. I really didn't.
And 7-0 at one
Yeah,
stage.
yeah, 7-0 just after an hour on the clock, I think it was, and it was 7-0. That's fantastic from a Buckie point of view. Banks of D, it was, I think, shell shock's probably a good opportunity to use that word again, because they clearly did not see that. But defending from D was abject. I'm sure we'll come back to that. But from a Buckie point of view, Lewis McKinnon must be delighted. It's a double for Finn Allen and for Josh Peters. JJ Hulse, the young Don, getting off the mark.
First senior goal.
Yeah, Sam Morrison and Callum Murray also scoring. So it's a very good day's work for the Jags. For the D, I guess it's all about the reaction at this point. But no, 6 points out of 6 for Buckie. Great start.
Yeah.
I think the thing we would say as well is, and there's other games we'll come on to, but the way the results went on Saturday, was probably 4 or 5 we could have picked as our result of the day, because there was lots of kind of interesting scores.
A lot of goals at the weekend, which always makes prep longer for the win. Paul Lawson, he described it, well, he said he'd never seen a team I was part of capitulate as badly as we did here. And I mean, it is concerning if you're Banks of D and you've got title aspirations this season. 7-2, that's heavy.
Yeah. And as I said, 7-0 down after 63 minutes. And it was the worst, actually, weekend for Banks of D since they joined the Highland League in 2022, their heaviest defeat. And yeah, I mean, what can you say to kind of argue against Paul Lawson's comment? Because that is horrific defending. To ship 7 goals, you just don't expect that from Banks of D. They've always been competitive. I know they've had periods since they've come in that they've maybe had key players missing, but you just expect more from a Banks of D team, even up at a difficult venue in Victoria Park. And yeah, they'll be feeling that one. That's a really bruising defeat this early in the season, and as I've said already, it's all about the reaction. And they've got 2 chances this week with Wednesday and Saturday to come. They've got to go and come back from this one.
The only thing you would say is it's as bad as it was, it's only 3 points. But
you touched on a record there. Banks of D's heaviest losses joining the Highland League 4 years ago now. A few other records, or a couple of other records, went to the weekend, Callum.
Clachnacuddin beating Huntly 6-1 at Christie Park. Their biggest win against Huntly since 1965, we're told, which...
It's that long ago, I wasn't even born. There you go.
Are you sure?
I feel it sometimes.
But, which, I mean, a great win for Clach, first and foremost, but that sort of, that's 61 years ago, sort of sums up, I suppose, how emphatic a victory it was for them, really. And Connor Gethins last week was sort of a wee bit frustrated with it in their draw with Turriff United, that he felt it just lacked a bit of cutting edge at the top end of the pitch. Well, certainly didn't lack it at Christie Park on Saturday. And I mean, Jordan McRae getting a hat-trick to get off and running, which will be a pleasing sight for the Lily Whites supporters as well. And I think for Huntly, Graham Stewart, similar to Paul Lawson, was sort of speaking about capitulation. It was sort of 1-1 with half an hour to go, and then the roof very much fell in. But a great record for Clach to win that handsomely, and good for them as well to get off the mark with their first win of the season. And the other sort of notable record we picked out is Lossiemouth winning 2-1 up at Invergordon, thanks to Aidan Cruikshank's double, and that's the first time the Coasters have won their first 2 league games since 2016. And really was sort of the work they've done this summer, signings they've made, Aidan Cruikshank being one, and then beating Huntly last week, beating Invergordon, Martin Charlesworth and Kevin Flett. They couldn't have asked for a better start to the season, and all credit to them. And for Invergordon, it was a first home game, and by all accounts, I think they did a really good crowd at the game, and a lot of people sort of in the area excited to turn out and see how they got on. And Gary Campbell was a bit disappointed that he felt they didn't really show what they're capable of and what they're about. And he said sort of the good things on display last week against Fraserburgh weren't there against Lossiemouth, and he said that no complaints were getting beat.
Well, I actually had written in my notes it would be easy for the Highland League Weekly host over the years to scoff at how much talk there was in the post-match reaction, perhaps more than there was about the actual match, about the crowd and the hospitality and how nice Invergordon's ground was and stuff. But you're right to bring it up, Callum, because if you have aspirations to climb up through the pyramid, as Invergordon perhaps do, you need to take people with you, and you need to kind of build that back in over the seasons.
Definitely, and I think, like I've said, but even before the season started, I think Invergordon, in terms of what they've tried to do, have gone about it the right way in terms of the work they've put into their ground. And like even sort of what Martin Charlesworth was saying afterwards, Lossie enjoyed sort of being part of the occasion, the spectacle of it being Invergordon's first home game. He said they were looked after well, and they with post-match food and all that sort of thing, they were treated well, which is, it's always sort of a feather in your cap, really, to sort of treat people properly. And then in terms of the crowd they got there, and I know they're doing bits and pieces of hospitality and things like that, they are trying to sort of, I think, what I would say, sort of build it properly regardless of what's actually happening on the pitch, all the sort of other bits and pieces you need to do, they're going about that in the right way, I would say.
Yeah, Press and Journal halftime fair review to follow at some point. 3 teams got off the mark with their first point of the campaign on Saturday. Callum, Inverurie Locos 3, Forest Mechanics 3. Let's start there.
Well, that was, I think, a welcome point for Inverurie there first, and probably, I would say, out of the 2, they're probably slightly happier with the point, given that they trailed 2-1 and 3-2, and then I know Forest towards the end were disappointed they didn't get a penalty for Callum Frame was sort of through and looked like he got a nudge in the back and it wasn't given. And then following on for that, Kyle McLeod has one that's cleared off the line, which probably 99 times out of 100 would end up in the net. So I think the Can-Cans felt, disappointed with that. What I would say, and although it's no massive consolation to them because 3 of them were in their goal on Saturday, I think Forrest already looking like the sort of entertainers in the early part of the season. 6 goals in a game last week, 6 goals again on Saturday. So
have they been the entertainers before?
No, it was Huntley.
Yeah.
It was Huntley. I seem to remember as well.
Back a few seasons of it. I think so. Basically, what I would say is, so at the moment, if you're going to watch Forest, you're certainly getting value for money in terms of spectacle and entertainment. But for Inverurie, I think Dean Donaldson, after drawing a blank last week, he was pleased with the attack and play. Ethan Cairns against his old club got a hat-trick as well, so he'd be delighted with his contribution. But again, defensively, I think sort of maybe things to ponder for Inverurie there.
Another team who got up and running at the weekend were Keith. They drew 1-1 at home to Nairn County. Much improved after a painful first weekend.
Yeah, they had that horror show against Forest on the opening day, and so yeah, Craig Reid needed a response, and it's
Craig Hughes.
Craig Reid actually as well. Because you're jumping in there. Craig had a very good afternoon on Saturday after a disappointment. Both Craigs will be happier. That's what we're saying, Callum.
McKeon, Keith's goal, Ben Barron sounded like eventually beat Craig Reid after Nairn had a couple close near goals. But the thing with Keith is, after last season, we were expecting them to, hopefully have a good season again this time and get good for them to get up and run. Yeah,
it's that word expectation, isn't it? Because like you said, Keith did so well. Manager got manager of the year. You're thinking, right, can they kick on this year? But it's not as straightforward as that. For me, Keith punched above their weight spectacularly in the second half of last season, and there needs to be just a little bit of understanding of there's going to be ups and downs at Kyneth Park, and we probably saw that in the first weekend. The response has been much better. They could have won this one. I think substitute Lawrence Egan hit the bar late on, which would have been a great win for Keith if it had gone in. But Nairn are a tough nut to crack. Nobody has an easy afternoon against the wee county, so I think Keith will be pleased to get off the mark and look at try and build on that in the week ahead.
Where's Academy 0, Strathspey Thistle 2, Strathspey's first win, the new campaign, first points in the new campaign. Sounded like one of those games, this one, where you score reasonably early, Bobby Thompson, you then
You class after half an hour is reasonably early.
Well, it's in the first third of the game just. You then hold out a bit before sealing it late on through Andy Gregg. My biggest concern, if I was Wick, would be the 3 hamstring injuries, but I'm sure you're going to cover.
Aye, well, it was kind of game a bit of 2 halves, really. Strathspey, I think, had the better of the first half, scored. Wick, I think, had plenty of sort of territory and asked a few questions in the second half, but I think Gary Manson was quite, maybe just frustrated, it's maybe not quite the right word, but just not particularly amused with their attack and play. Like they sort of had a goal, but nothing really broke for them, and they were maybe just a bit blunt in the final third, but didn't really help them when they lost Davy Allen and Mark McGregor in the first 20 minutes to hamstring injuries. And then, it's 2 players that they were looking at sort of to have big roles on the day, and you're without them, so that probably didn't help. And I think for Strathspey to get first win and get up and running, and 2 of their new signings in the summer, Robbie Thompson and Andrew Gregg, scoring, keeping a clean sheet as well, and sort of withstanding the pressure they were put under in the second half. It was all very positive very positive signs for the Granton Jugs to carry forward with it.
Now we must come on to Rothes. Finished bottom last season before as well.
I lost 2 seasons.
Heavy defeat 7-0 at home to Fraserburgh. The weekend, 6 different scorers. Scott Barber got a double. Didn't really feel like they laid a glove on Fraserburgh in this one.
No, I think they were 6-0 down before they got anywhere near the Fraserburgh goal, and by that point you're only chasing a consolation. Yeah, I mean, I watched the highlights. They were lucky to get away with only 7, really. It was a very difficult afternoon for the home side against a Broch team that have certainly responded strongly to their drawing a blank against Invergordon in the opening day of the season.
Seen anything from Rothes that suggests they aren't going to be bottom again this season at this point?
Well, it's played 2, scored none, conceded 10. So no, at this point, if you're just basing it on that, you can't see anything other than a very long and challenging season ahead.
Right now, I wouldn't say we've seen enough really to suggest that, but it is very early that they'll get off the bottom. But I think like Ryan Essence said during pre-season, they were aware that there will be sort of painful days and painful games during the season, and to sort of wheel out the old cliche, it's nae playing the likes of Fraserburgh that really will define where they end up. But I think what would be concerning about it is like losing 2 goals in the first 10 minutes or so, and that sort of probably saps the enthusiasm and the belief in terms of can we get a result straight away almost when you're a couple of goals down very early, and like the manner of that would be the thing that would concern me a wee bit. But they've got to keep working at it, and I know they're still trying to get 1 or 2 more players in, and that will maybe make a difference for them.
Okay, moving on then to have a little bit of a look ahead at the coming week. We've got Wednesday games to come in the days ahead. Any ones catching your eye, Paul?
I'm sticking with the Broch. And as I said, they drew a blank in the first day of the season, but they've responded with 14 goals in the last 7 days. 7 against Hull Russell in the Evening Express Aberdeenshire Cup, and then another 7 up at McKeswick Park. Quite impressive too. I talked in pre-season about Ryan Sargent having a big season. He's yet to get off the mark. I know he didn't play in the cup tie, but 14 goals and he's not got any of them is probably bodes well for Fraserburgh. And Barber, Scott Barber's got that's 5 in the last 2, so he's ticking along nicely. But
top? Who's top?
Oh, who's top?
Well, he would be in all competitions.
It's not good for Ryan Sargent prediction that.
No, early days.
He's nae in the league.
But yeah, they've got a big week. They've got Keith at Bellslie on Wednesday night, and Keith beat them 2-1 there last season. And then on Saturday they're going up to Mossett Park, which was I think a 4-1 defeat to start last season. So a chance to probably try and exercise some demons for Mark Cowie and his players this week. And it's an important week for them. I think if they are able to pick up maximum points from the next 2 games, I think 10 out of 12 will be a good start for the Broch.
In terms of sort of looking at the cards on Wednesday and Saturday, my game in each to watch out for, I think on Wednesday, Huntly against Devon Vale, very interesting. 2 sides yet to get off the mark, but I think out of the 2, Devon Vale would be a bit happier with how they've played. They got beat 2-1 at home at Turriff on Saturday, but it sounded like, I know Turriff weren't Greg Moore wasn't massively pleased with how they played, but Mackenzie Taylor's brace won it for them. But Devon Vale, I think, certainly were competitive and decent, and like Brodie Alberts equalised, and then maybe didn't help that they lost Marcus Binney sent off not long after that. But like Gary Wood was although you're never happy not picking up points, he was reasonably content with that performance, and they played okay away at Brora the week before. So I suppose for the Bamfors, it's now, playing a Huntly side that, had a couple of knocks in terms of confidence and things with losing their first 2. Can they then go to Christie Park and sort of get themselves going and get off the mark? And I mean, Huntly as well, like Graham Stewart was saying afterwards, there needs to be a response of some kind to that, because it just, wasn't good enough, the manner in which they were beaten by Clach. And then the game I think it's worth keeping an eye on out of all of them on Saturday is Buckie against Brora at Victoria Park. And I mean, both of them have got tricky matches on Wednesday, so they might still have their 100% records come Saturday. But I think if they both win on Wednesday and they're going into that both 9 out of 9, I think his makings are a right good game. Be interesting just to see how it pans out, because especially for Buckie, maybe with like not necessarily being expected to be up there at the very sort of top end challenging. I think if they can get off to a you know, if you can get off to a very good start, it can often sort of carry you a long way.
Yeah, it's time to make a statement the weekend, perhaps. Okay, before we go, let's take a moment to recap the results from Saturday in the Breedon Highland League. We had the Buckie Thistle 7, Bankside 2, Devon Vale 1, Cardiff United 2, with Formartine United 1, Brora Rangers 4. It was Huntly 1, Clachnacuddin 6, Invergordon 1, Lossiemouth 2, Inverurie Local Works 3, Forest Mechanics 3, Keith 1, Nairn County 1, Rothes 0, Fraserburgh 7, and Wick Academy 0, Strathspey Thistle 2. Let's have a look at how that all affects this fledgling Breedon Highland League table. That's it then for this episode of Highland League Weekly. Thanks to Paul and Callum for joining me. As mentioned, plenty more to come in the Breedon Highland League this season, including on Wednesday and Saturday this week, so keep your eyes peeled for updates on all of that. You can find them on social media and on the Press and Journal website. Until we see you next, please enjoy the football, whichever games you're watching.